All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Chestnut Checkers. I am Keith Riddle, your co-host, with my other host here, Jordan Tampien. And today's guest is none other than Jordan Allen. And Jordan is another Spokane native here. Are you a native or just a local?
I've been here since I was 2, so I consider myself a native.
Pretty native.
Yeah.
With BuyWander's. So thanks for coming out today, Jordan, or agreeing to not come out and do this via Zoom or however we're doing.
It's our first Zoom one, so this should be a fun little exercise.
I screw this up all the time because I just assume everything is a Zoom meeting now. Like nothing's in person anymore. I feel terrible because I'm looking at your guys' office right now and looking at mine, and I'd much rather be where you're at. So.
It's more importantly,
it's not
Brick
an
West
office. This is actually a studio that we pay for. My office would be like stacks of paper.
Yeah. This is way too clean.
Yeah. At any rate,
we haven't got any returned beer into the warehouse yet, so we don't drink, unless it's returned, we don't eat it or drink it.
That's a classic move.
That's a good. So, let's start there. You're talking about returned goods. Talk to us a little bit about your latest venture and why you're talking about returned goods.
Yeah. Well, it's a wild story. I went on a kind of a 6-month journey of what the hell happens to the stuff that we returned, and so. Kind of found that, I guess I assumed most of it went back on the shelf. Like you guys have bought stuff before and it's, wrong size, wrong color, too big, too small, whatever. You decide to return it. You got 2 of them. If you've opened up the box or damaged the packaging in any way, it goes back to the store, to a back room, then ends up in some distribution center. And then this stuff gets shipped far away into places like Kentucky and Kansas and, Atlanta, and it's to then end up getting shipped back again. And so I went and saw these.
Why do they ship it there? Do they just for repackaging or sorting it out? Why?
No, well, so there's a lot of nuance in the space, but when you look at say a Costco or a Target that carry other people's products, so these big box stores, they need to make room for new products coming in because they have physical real estate. They don't have an infinite aisle like an Amazon, so. New products come in, you buy a Traeger grill, it doesn't fit on your balcony or you don't like it, you decide to return it after a day, or some people after 5 years of heavy use. It goes back to a Costco, they don't know what to do with it. They don't want the next customer to have anything other than a perfect uniform experience. Can you imagine buying a Stanley Cup and there's mold in it, or you bought an air fryer and somebody cooked some chicken nuggets in it? So now that product is deemed worth 0 value. And so 80 to 90% of the items we get are still in new or new condition, but they go to a back room. Costco doesn't carry packaging for the 4,000 items that are in their store. So then they're we'll just throw it on a pallet, send it to the distribution center in Yakima. And they're well, we need to make room for new shit too. So then we'll send it to our centralized facility in Las Vegas or Phoenix or, Dallas. So it goes down there and they're well, hey, we want to buy a returns truck. And it's $10,000 and it's $5,000 to ship it. And Costco probably spent $5,000 touching it and moving it around. So the whole thing is an absolute mess. And so when you think of a Costco, they're merchandising experts where they send the right items in the right season in the right quantity to the Spokane market. So we might get Seahawks gear instead of Atlanta Falcons gear. But then when this stuff gets returned, it ends up in Atlanta where nobody wants Seahawks gear. Yeah. And so when you think about just the mess of all of this, in the future, imagine if everything bought online or in store in Spokane, instead of going to a Kohl's or a FedEx to drop it off or anywhere else, those items stay here. So if you look at the 7 largest retailers in Spokane, there's $300 million of returns that happen every year. Just
that's crazy.
Each Costco store, they're doing $250 million a year on average, and we've got 4 kind of in our area. That's a shitload of returns that are leaving this market and going to Atlanta. Why not keep them here, and sell them to the local market? What their big concern is, we don't want these products ending up back online to compete with our new channels. So for us, because we sell everything exclusively through our site in a 1-day kind of no reserve auction, we don't really compete with the same customer that they have. So it's worked out really well so far. We launched in February. We got almost 7,000 registered users here in Spokane. Probably 500 of them are outside of Spokane, and they're like, I didn't know that you guys were curbside pickup only, so like, you ship that garage door opener to Atlanta, and we're like, oh, not, trying to make some exceptions here and there, but it's all local, so it's all online e-commerce, but all for Spokane customers.
Okay, so I'm interested just because I like hustling old junk.
Of course you do.
How does one go about becoming a client or a customer? Sign up on your website or?
Yeah, you sign up, and so it's kind of wild because our space is small. We're on this is about to be our 4th warehouse move in less than a year. Talk about brain damage.
Yeah. Well, where's your location now, Jordan?
We get returns in from Home Depot. What's that?
Where's your location now? The spot you're at right now?
We're on Trent. We'll be here for about another week, and then we're moving out to like Sprague and Pines area.
Sprague and Pines. Okay. Yeah.
Can't give you the exact location because the lease isn't quite signed yet, but we're working through that. But yeah, like we get, we'll get an Amazon truck that comes in, an entire semi truck, no pallets, floor to ceiling boxes, the stuff that you guys mailed back to like a FedEx, and it comes in and it looks like the pyramids of Giza in our warehouse. And so then our team goes through and processes it, figures out, what it is. Then 2 days later, here comes a truckload of stuff from Lowe's or Home Depot or Target. Sometimes we don't know what's coming in on these trucks. Sometimes we'll get like half-used crab pots, probably that were from Boston or somewhere on the East Coast. And, they end up in a return center and we'll buy it. We get products that, somebody bought a gym set. I don't know if you've ever bought a gym set online and tried to put it together, but I don't know if any of them ever go together. So those end up getting returned. We've had stuff that was purchased in like Portland, Oregon, like full size, home gym set, got sent back down to Dallas to the return center to only get sent all the way back up to Spokane and get sold. It's absolutely just,
wild. It is crazy to think about. It is crazy.
Yeah.
The ecosystem for sure.
So they've been online and then they come
at this point. Everything you can buy at Costco, Walmart, Target, or not everything on Amazon yet, but in 3 years we'll probably have sold everything you can buy on Amazon.
Yeah.
Well, pretty soon people are probably just returning things to you. I would assume, like if these vendors are like if I'm Home Depot, at some point do I want if like a client wants to return something, do I say, well, you just go return it to these guys instead of returning?
That's our hope. Like, can we rewire this entire system and eliminate the shipping and logistics around all this? Like, these items were sold in that market. Why not keep them there and sell them the next day?
So I'm gonna shift the conversation a little bit to be like, so what made you even think of this? Like, why? How? Imagine my assumption is you're between ventures, or you're looking for something else that's cool to do, or do you have like some sort of intimate industry knowledge of this?
Well, a little bit of both. So my previous company that Jordan invested in, we got closer, it was called Dorsey. It was the Justin Timberlake of home auctions.
Mm-hmm.
We sold.
I don't know what that means. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It was sexy. We did all.
It looked good. It looked good.
The home inspections were done up front and kind of reorganized some of the home buying process. Turns out, most real estate agents are allergic to auctions, and I think generally, anything that was kind of innovative on the venture side. So we ended up, we're sitting on a bunch of cash and ended up selling to a company that basically was like a white labeled eBay. And their founder was like, they basically, for like GM, IBM, De Beers Diamonds, the state of Minnesota, they're like a white labeled eBay for like liquidation for Fortune 500 companies. So I'm on their board and I go down there. And he's like, Jordan, you're not going to believe this, like warehouse with returns. And I'm like, this is like the worst thing I've ever heard. Like a warehouse with a bunch of old combs and like, trinkety crap. And so he's like, well, let me show you. So then we go to one of his customers' facilities and 100 semi trucks a week backing up, bringing all the goodies.
I would be so excited.
Yeah, you would.
I would be so excited.
It's like a yard sale in the back of a truck getting unloaded. No technology. People are running around. They're selling stuff at auction. They don't have customer acquisition was pretty easy for them, but they were growing, they're profitable. And so I went on this 6-month roadshow, like I was explaining, like what happens to all this stuff, and kind of figured out what the model is. And then my co-founder Brock was the CEO over at Caspian, ETL screen cover. I'm like, Brock, you're not going to believe this return spacing. He's like, Jordan, we're doing 150 million a year in revenue, and I got a warehouse with $15 million of returns in it. Like, I think I know the return space. So it was like I beelined to, his warehouse and, met up with him, and we're able to see like, oh my gosh, there's $400 like French cast iron cookware that was essentially brand new. Maybe if you touched it on the oven, you can't sell it as new. There was RockShox mountain bike forks that like people are like, hey, I'm worried about, somebody altered this in any way. So they had teams that were trying to process and sell stuff and sell it on eBay and everything else. And, we started jamming on this whole concept, and, we think we kind of are onto something with this model where we sell everything online in a 1 day, no reserve auction. So everything starts at $1 and it's selling. There's no reserves. We've sold $600 barbecues for $5. We want to throw up when we do that, but like, we also want customers getting good deals. And so, but the crazy part is we don't ship or deliver anything. Like, our customers come to our warehouse, pick it up. It's like Nicolas Cage, gone in 60 seconds. Cars roll into the parking lot. Stuff goes into the back of their car. They're gone. We're getting 200 cars a day right now rolling through our really crappy kind of parking lot. We hope to get at our next location closer to 1,000. And so then what's really wild is we also, have 7-day returns. And typically, like in the auction model, it's like all sales final, no more negotiations. We allow our customers to return it. So they just have that like ultimate confidence. But there's been other kind of liquidation companies here in Spokane that you're probably familiar with, where they got stuff on shelves and some of it sells in a day and some of it's been there for 15 years. Like,
I assume you guys do, but you have to like check or have quality control for this stuff. Like, do you just auction it, or do you like cycle the trigger and make sure it works? And
we go through what we call like a light inspection model. So we'll use like image recognition, document recognition to figure out like, what the hell is this thing? Some stuff comes in with no packaging. Some stuff comes in brand new. And it's like, because there's seasonal shelf pulls where, hey, that clothing or that handbag or that, computer was last year's model, like get it off the shelf, get the new model in. So there's things like that. We'll go through and like, like a vacuum, we'll go plug it in, see if it turns on. Like, we don't, throw sunflower seeds on the ground here in the warehouse and like actually see if it vacuums it up. But that's why we allow customers to
7 days.
Yeah.
We have people though that are building their entire business. They're building like the, like the, not outlet malls. What are they called? They're kind of like an indoor yard sale where people rent spaces. What are those called?
Like a flea market or something?
Like a flea market, like
consignment shop.
Like a bunch of those that have popped up here in town.
Yeah.
That are, it's like the WeWork of yard sales kind of a space. We have people that come and buy it from us just to stock their stores. Every day.
What a cool innovative model. And it sounds like it was a big problem. So it sounds like you guys are helping solve a big problem. Well, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, the magnitude of this is kind of hard to imagine, but we just got through the Christmas holiday. So over the next 90 days, like, the returns are off the chart. So if you look at, a 14% return rate between online and in store, that's, we're on track to return $1 trillion of stuff here in the US. So if you think of the US GDP is like 33 trillion, retail is like 7 trillion, almost $1 trillion of returns. That's 3% of the US GDP in just shit that you sent back to the store.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
I had a great mentor of mine one time say, Keith, you get paid in proportion to the problems that you can solve. So it sounds like it sounds like this is a big problem, right? Like, if you guys, hats off to you, but this is a huge endeavor. But I mean, if you guys can help solve this problem, like, hopefully it is the lucrative venture and it works out great for everybody, right?
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting about it is, my background has been in kind of the venture capital space now for like the last 15 years, which, if you're not familiar with that, most people in Spokane, may not be. Like, it's hit a grand slam home run or strike out. Like, they don't care if you get a single, a double, or a triple. The hard thing to like take investor money, try to grow this thing into the biggest thing possible or die, but they want you to do that. Like, they need a 10x or 20x outcome. So they'll place a lot of bets. And so when you look at like this company, when we were meeting with investors, we had forklifts in the warehouse going back and forth, and there was returns up on, and a lot of the investors were living in New York City in a studio apartment. They're like, I don't even know anybody that has a car. Like, who would drive to a store and buy stuff? Everything's just delivered to you. And it's like, then you realize that, like, when you're, in a market like Spokane, where go to a Costco on a Saturday or really any day, like go look at any of the major retailers, like the parking lots are full. So it takes kind of a unique investor to, like, this is kind of an ugly business, like lots of cardboard boxes and warehouses, and it's not sexy, but can we use all the power of e-commerce and data and personalization to bring this out of the dark ages? Like, it's wild.
So what do you see for the future of your business? Like, I mean, 5-10 years down the road, do you think?
Yeah. We hope that if we can open up, like, call it 20 facilities around the country and all the major kind of like NFL markets over the next 3 years, that, we can save a lot of returns, save customers a lot of money. Retailers have a major headache right now. Like, they don't want to touch and process and ship this stuff around either. They just don't know what to do with it. Nobody's gotten big enough to be able to, like, hey, Costco, send us everything. No questions asked. Hey, Target, send us everything. Walmart, send us everything. So if we get to that size, we can start taking the nation's worth of returns. They get liquidity faster. So right now, kind of sucks for us too. We'll get returns from a retailer and we'll get, like, 50 air conditioning units in December and then like 100 space heaters in January or in July, because by the time they went through that 6-month return cycle before they got back to us, it's like wrong season, wrong customer. A lot of the people in the space have to sit on stuff for 9 months to sell it. It's just like, it's a mess.
Do you guys have limitations on what you'll take in one time? I don't know. Somebody, like, they return their John Deere tractor and, like, you guys taking that, like, or is it like mostly consumer products?
We're built to sell everything, because part of the magic is everything starts at $1. So we don't have to burn the calories to go figure out, like, what's a John Deere tractor going to sell for that you've been used for 2 years versus, like, hey, there's some scratches on the front, or hey, it's missing a tire. Like, there's a million permutations of how this stuff gets returned. The auction solves that. And, like, that's where my passion was from my previous company, like, really understanding that, like, auction psychology. And when everything starts at $1, you get the largest possible pool of buyers who are willing to come in and say, I'll buy it. And then ultimately 2 or 3 people kind of take it through to the finish line. But we're still selling stuff mostly 70 to 80% off all day, every day. And so, kind of wild to think about, our entire warehouse turns over. If you saw our warehouse too, you'd be like, there's no freaking way this turns over that fast. We turn over our entire warehouse over every 10 days.
Jeez.
Gone. Everything's moved out. So think 5 semi trucks gone every week just in Spokane.
Wow. Uh-huh. Massive market.
Well, yeah, and I want to spin it a little bit, because I think part of it is I wanted you to talk more about that, but I think it's not everybody gets a chance to get in this inside the head of Jordan Allen. And so take us back to the way the way you look at the world, though, is so unique. Tell us about the first venture, right? I don't think maybe just born, go in and create a game-changing industry, right? Give us a little progression of Jordan Allen through those.
Yeah. I think I've always, since I was little, like, doing, business stuff. But my first one came when I went to the Portland State University. It's kind of the Harvard of the downtown Portland area. I started this company called Book Ghost, and it was like a textbook exchange. And you learn a lot about a startup. And it was like, well, hey, I got 5 roommates. Like, those are my new business partners. Like, they didn't care about business. They were like psychology majors or art history majors, or, wanted to be, doctors or something. And so, but we all partnered together, and I kind of quickly realized, like, well, shit, I'm the one doing all the work. Like, sit around and talk about who owns the most of the company.
We're friends. Let's go into business together.
Yeah.
But it was crazy. Like, we had, we got 10,000 people to the website, like, almost every day during, like, the beginning and end of the semester. Because you'd buy a book for $100, take it back to the bookstore. Here's $20. They'd sell it back to somebody for $80. We're just like, it was like a peer-to-peer textbook thing. And, who knows how that would have gone long-term as maybe more books went digital, but learned a lot. And then the next, then I joined the Army kind of right after that. So I went in, I got to do the whole, Airborne Ranger program. I've been in 400 plus combat operations. Absolutely loved it. Like, kicking ass, taking names, Iraq, Afghanistan, before I had a wife or kids. But the military in some ways is a lot like a startup, like zero tolerance for failure operations, like trying to lead people when times are really tough and it's easy to get a bad attitude about everything. And, it's all about scale. So everybody puts their ammo pouch on their right side and their first aid kit on their left side. So anybody on the battlefield anywhere, like, how to get their ammo from them, or how to get their first aid kit from them, like you can, to help. So an unbelievable level of scale. So then it was like, I'm kind of tired of eating goat out of a fiery cauldron and like hanging out in Humvees all day. Like, I think it's time to get in the hospitality space. So when I was in Iraq, my younger brother was in Afghanistan, and we're like saved up a bunch of money. We were young and single at the time. We're like, hey man, let's we want to go back to Spokane for our 2 weeks leave. We're like, no, let's go to like Denver. And so we went and stayed in an apartment. Again, imagine this is like 2010, 2011. It was like on Craigslist, hey, I'm in Afghanistan. Can I meet you out front with cash and rent your apartment? Nobody had heard of like this home shared concept before. Mm-hmm. And so we went in, 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment overlooking Coors Field, beer in the fridge, pizza in the oven. We can wash our clothes like humans in a washer and dryer instead of going into a hotel. And it's like living on top of your suitcases. And it just like the overwhelming sense of like, this is the future of travel. Like, oh, I can't believe this. We just paid like $1,500 for 3 nights. Hotels were roughly that same price because it was, the Colorado Rockies home opener. And so came back to Spokane, went and rented one of the Madison apartments. Mm-hmm. I'd actually put an ad up first, and it was like, hey, $800 for Hoop Fest. And somebody called and booked it. And I just started writing their credit card information down. I didn't have anywhere to put their credit card. I just started writing it down.
Makes sense.
Like, holy shit. They just paid for like at that time, it's kind of crazy, but they were like $500 a month for rent. And so I quickly called the landlord and I'm like, hey, can I rent that apartment? And so we had like a week to figure out how to like furnish it. So I borrowed my sister's futon, had an army poncho that we cut. And we were kind of proud of like the design at the time. It was like, look how good we did. It was the slummiest, like unacceptable accommodations for anybody. But guess what? And we're like, okay, but by the time September hits, like Spokane's only a summer market. Booked through September. Doctor came in, booked it for 3 months. So like $1,800. We're like, oh my God. Like we were onto something. And then we just kept like, we should try Seattle. And Seattle was like $1,700 a month in rent. Again, this was like in 2012. If we were smart, we would have signed 30-year leases.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 2 years later, they're like $4,000. But then we went to Portland. We had some crazy shit happen. Like within 5 months, some mom rented the apartment out for their child, and they threw a New Year's Eve party, like a high school party.
I say kids were partying, dude. I know where this story's going.
Girl jumped out of the window.
Oh, I did not know where that story was going.
Yeah, I know. And it was like, we were like onto something so incredible. Now we're like, this is, and so like, luckily, I don't want to say like, if it had been like an accidental thing, we would have been a lot of stuff, but it was, because she jumped out, like kind of cleared the air and we were able to, continue going. But, we had, so fast forward, almost a decade, we had, 2,500 apartments doing over, 100 million in annual revenue. Vacation rentals were kind of the golden child of like investment at that time. And then COVID hit. And it was like, I still haven't found a worse business model than urban core high-rise apartments we just never planned for like a global travel lockdown. And zero revenue.
I don't think anybody planned for COVID. I mean, like, I don't know anybody had a plan for like global lockdown. I mean, even in every business, I was never planned on nobody not coming and buying anything.
Yeah, on March 13th, like it was awesome. And then on March 14th, like I remember South by Southwest closed, then like Final Four shut down, and then like the NBA season closed. And you're just like, we had $10 million in chargebacks hit our bank account, and 5 hours. To see $10 million leave your bank account in that time frame is just never heard of. Like Airbnb changed all their policies and said it was an act of God. So they just took all their bookings out, which was, 10 million in deposits probably.
So when you were doing the stay Alfred thing, how was Airbnb helping or hindering you? Because you guys started before Airbnb?
We were, they were technically before us, but nobody really heard of Airbnb until it was like, and at that point it was like stinky college kids traveling around in backpacks, staying in people's like extra bedrooms. That's what it's called.
It was an extra room.
Bed and breakfast. And
so did you guys find you were competing with them initially up front, or you just had different models?
No, think of it like they were like hotels.com and we were trying to be the Marriott and the Hilton. So they were like a channel for us to book on. But, where the competition happened is, so we went to Nashville. So we created all these like fake ads on TripAdvisor and we're like, what market should we expand to? Like, well, let's put up fake ads and see like how many inquiries we get. This was back before you could book online. You had to send an inquiry and like your date, and there wasn't pricing. You kind of made it up on the spot. So we set up ads all over the country, and Nashville was number 2. And when we went there, there was 15 vacation rentals. There might be 5,000 now in Nashville. And so that market just printed money. The rents were $1,500. I think we were renting them out for $10,000 a month on average, maybe $12,000 a month. Just incredible margins. Our goal was like, you can go anywhere, but as long as we're on like First and Main, that's kind of where we shine, is just getting the best real estate. And then we looked at our data and we're like, oh my gosh, New Orleans is like 3 times more than that. And so I didn't really know anything about New Orleans other than like Hurricane Katrina and people shooting helicopters. So it was like, oh my gosh, this is like scary. And we went down there, and it's still probably my favorite city to like visit. The culture and everything else is just, incredible. But vacation rentals kind of saved like their downtown. Like there's probably 200 buildings in the central business district of New Orleans that were completely renovated just for short-term rentals.
Yeah. What was the hardest part of the journey? Like, I know there's probably ups, downs through the whole thing, but as you look back on it now.
Yeah. Everything was hard, man.
Yeah.
Like, we
good answer.
Truth.
I'd say some of my biggest learning lessons are like building a, people talk about like, oh, we got a great culture. And like, what does that mean? I found out what a great culture was by finding out first what a bad culture was. We had this guy named Ross. He was an absolute dirtbag, but he was kind of number 1 in sales. And so people are like, hey, I think Ross is like sleeping in the office. I'm like, yeah, but he's like, dude, he's crushing sales.
He's number 1 in sales.
People are like, hey, I think he's doing drugs in the office. I'm like, I know, but you guys, he's doing 3 times more sales than anybody else. And then people are like, hey, he's kind of harassing people in the office. I'm like, yeah, but but. And then one day they're like, hey, Ross isn't here. Like, he went through all of our like documents, contacted all of our cleaners, all of our apartment owners, said he was somebody else, and tried to like copy our business model. And it was just like, man, I should have seen the warning signs. Like when you don't have like a culture, how things can get out of control. And so we kind of developed like the 4 H's: happy, humble, high performing, and loyal, because we couldn't figure out an H word to make loyal. And those are the things where you're getting people that can check their ego at the door. You're not a know-it-all. You're willing to work with each other as a team. I think that team first mentality, you can hire commitment, experience, or like just all-star talent. Kind of seems like the committed group of folks are with you through thick and thin. And I don't know, I tend to lean kind of more on the commitment side. Like, you're drinking the Kool-Aid along with us, and you just, you may not be the smartest or the most experienced, but like, you're going to come grind with us and, really dedicated to the mission.
What were some of those first positions you hired as you started scaling from city to city, I assume, besides a cleaner?
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, our first person we hired was Kiri. Kiri, she was named after a character in Beastmaster. She'd probably kill me if she listens to this podcast. But she showed up, and I don't think she really said anything to us for like 2 or 3 weeks. She was so quiet, cold-blooded killer assassin on getting tasks done. Like, just did it without really saying a whole lot. And then she came in like 3 weeks later and she's like, hey, I bought a car. And we almost threw up because we're like, oh my gosh, like, what if this doesn't work out? What if like we have to let her go? She just bought a car. And then you start, like, as you grow your company, people start having kids and buying houses. And like, there's a tremendous amount of pressure as a founder to like try to just not have negatively affect dozens or hundreds of families. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, you can't help it. So like living with that every day, it was like, oh my gosh, it kind of made us fight harder, knowing that, we didn't want to let her down. Yeah. And so after that, we hired a bunch of college kids, and we kind of hired like the stay-at-home mom brigade. Like, hey, our kids are out of the house. If you can manage like a kid's soccer schedule and school and everything else, like you can manage anything. And so we went through the next like 5 years of hiring, kind of first time back in the career for a while. Moms crushed it. Honestly, I think you can build a $1 trillion business through moms.
Yeah, I want to back up to one part you said there, kind of where you were talking about that pressure. I mean, because it's a growth pressure. You don't know it even exists. What were some things because at some point, what was the most employees you had at Stay Alfred at the peak? Yeah. Like what were things
with vendors and everything else? Probably 3,000.
Yeah. 4,000. That you're like responsible for on a daily basis, right? What are things you did personally to kind of like either not cope with it, but prepare, or mentally, like how do you mentally approach something like that? Because I had way less and I still struggle with that being one of the hardest things I deal with.
Yeah, it's really hard because, you want to give everybody, equal amount of attention, equal amount of opportunity. I think some of the harder things were when we had like 10 people, we could kind of sit in a room and like figure out what we were going to do. And then, some people weren't able to scale with the company, but I still loved them to death. And so we hired like a few more layers and eventually got to that like enterprise level executive team that, knew how to delegate and manage and had a lot of experience. And, when they had issues with like some of our early employees, you're like, you were here when we started. And now somebody who's been here for a year, but is highly experienced may view you differently. And that sucked. They're like, cause you're like, well, I brought this new person on to kind of take over this department. And now they want to maybe get rid of somebody who I love. And it's like, you can't, where you step in, where you don't, try not to pick favorites when you kind of do have favorites. Those things were difficult. And as a new founder, like you don't always get to see what does right look like in marketing? What does right look like in operations? What does right look like in accounting or tech or various components? I found like what right looks like in a few of those, but until you see it, you just don't know. And so there was a few areas of the company that, I thought were better running than they probably were and should have found some new, talent in those spots. But I don't know, I loved it, man. It was an incredible journey. Like, we had, coming from Spokane and being able to go have some of the investors that we had and see that like what money looks like in Spokane compared to New York and LA, just not even in the same stratosphere of, but to be able to come back to Spokane and have Coors Light, go down to the Red Line and have some Coors Lights with folks was like, it kind of meant everything to us. So to be able to see what's there, but, operate a company here, create jobs. And that was the best part.
I love this conversation because it talks about like the human side of business, right? Yeah. And I think as entrepreneurs or business owners, like that's, my aha as you get older is like, that's the stuff that nobody talks to you about or trains you on, right? Like they're like, how do you fire your best friend? I don't think Harvard teaches that class, right? Or how do you tell your mother-in-law's best friend who's been working with you for 15 years that this company scaled past them, or and those are really on a day-to-day basis, like those are the nuances that we spend a lot of our time dealing with, right? Like we care about people, we love people, we also want the business to succeed, and then sometimes a lot of times those two things become in like, I don't know what you call it, not adversarial with each other, but
especially Jordan's in the real estate business, and real estate businesses are family businesses. Like for the most part, it's like I kind of found early, like there's 5% upside by hiring friends and family. There's 95% downside. So just don't do it.
Yeah.
Like there's no real benefit to it. It makes you feel good on the short term, but when things don't go well, it's like, you're going to fire me. Like I've got kids, I've got a family, it's like, that's a hard thing to have to deal with.
Well, and even sometimes when you can't, right? Like, I don't know. I think of like, I come from a farming background, but like my dad and my brother, and before my dad and my brother, it was my father and my grandfather worked together, like family farmers, but like there's no firing grandpa, right? Or there's like no firing your kid, like not on a family farm, right? So it's like, it's almost like, well, how do we make this work, right? With our differences of ideas. And I think, again, business is probably a little bit different aspect of if it's not a 100% family-owned business, but there's a lot of family-owned plumbing companies, electrical companies, like any of those trades sort of organized, and those pizza shops and restaurants.
The transition for those from like one generation to the next, I think they deal with like a different set of problems than like the startup world where those are bigger, they're established, they're the younger generation's trying to get more control to operate and do what they want to do. And the older generation's like, we've been doing it this way for 50 years. Like, don't change it. Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's more,
well, but it relates a little bit to what you talked about.
Like in a startup, we're like, dude, we're just trying to get $1 from somebody to see if this works.
And you talked a little bit about like new people or execs you come in hiring, and like the older people, they just, a little bit of that same dichotomy kind of exists because they come in and they're like, listen, we're here to make money and show profits and returns to our investors. And cool that you're unique. Jordan's cousin, but see you later.
Yeah. Well, it's super unique too, right? Because just because you've been the farmer and you worked with your dad doesn't mean you did it right.
No.
Didn't mean you were the most efficient. It didn't mean you're the best. And I think that's where what you do is so intriguing to me, because it's almost that cause above the person. Yet you got to bring that person along in the culture. Otherwise, you're going to not have the right culture to be sustainable. And I think yours is so unique because, go get a CEO who's built 10 companies. They're going to know tips, tricks, trades, but can they bring the people along with them? And I think so unique versus real estate. Like real estate's very static. Like, what you're buying into. Was it good or bad? It's easy to assess, but that business has a million moving parts every day.
Yeah. We kind of joke around the house. Like my wife's the meal ticket. I'm more of a lottery ticket, if you will. But I think you have to be mission oriented in this because it's so hard. You're asking people to do 1,000 more jobs than you would at like a large corporation where you get like a little sliver. Like, we were talking like we're dealing with huge investment funds that are multi-billion dollars, also loading up a pallet of Target return clothes and taking it to the homeless thing in my truck, like dropping that off earlier. And then, negotiating for a forklift off Facebook Marketplace because the guy wants $4,000 and I'm trying to get it for $2,000, and I got to go borrow my buddy's truck because it has the right brake setup to deliver the forklift to the warehouse. Like, can you imagine like the variety of work that you get every day? But also for some people, their head would explode. Like, it's not really for everyone.
No. I think that's I think that's fairly common in like the entrepreneurial world, especially if you're scaling a business. But like I have a script that I use, but I'm just curious, like, do you have a way that you talk to people or describe their job roles when you hire them, like with regard to that?
Absolutely not. We don't have one job description.
Right. like the toilet paper needs paper towels.
And it's like,
and I need a forklift picked up.
I mean, this kind of sounds crazy, but like 4 or 5 months ago, like that's half of our life as a company. So when you look at our initial role, it's like, hey, you process inventory. When a customer shows up, you deliver it to them. You also respond to like emails and tickets. Now we have like a front desk team and a put away team and a processing team. And then in 5 years, we'll have like a buying department for big box stores, a buying department for e-commerce brands, a buying department for like, you just see like the departments start to grow. And what is the most rewarding is when you bring somebody on who's inexperienced but hungry, and they rise up, and like the pyramid of org chart gets to be built below them versus above.
Yeah,
that's awesome when people scale with the company, because there's some diamonds out there that just, and especially the ones that maybe would have never been given a chance. Like we had a guy roll in, he had like a long hair, earrings, had like a long like leather black duster, and I'm like, this is the worst hire ever. Like, I just got out of the army, high and tight, and and he was an art history major, And I was like, oh man. And this guy was such a brilliant mind. I think people like in music and art just have like their business brain is like fully developed. And so he could just kind of see like 3D, and he, now he's at working for a Bay Area startup that's, well funded, and, I'm sure his salary is 3 or 4 times what it was what we were paying him. So to see people kind of grow and rise up into like more elevated roles, hopefully the folks that have worked for me in the past have significantly improved their experience and careers like that.
Does he still have long hair and earrings and wear a duster?
He kind of goes through phases. Like he's kind of one of those guys that like he'll shave and like slick his hair back one day, and you're like, who the hell are you? Like, because he would grow out a huge beard, and like there are a lot of different phases of his life of what his look was.
One other one is I've started, at least in our business, moving to raising kind of capital from East Coast, a lot of different locations. And I always wondered this for you: is it an advantage or a disadvantage operating out of Spokane? Like, do you go to the East Coast and they're like, wait, this is a breath of fresh air, this is just a different way to look? Or is it you're always having to overcome hurdles because you're out of Spokane?
So I'd kind of break this up into probably at least 2 parts. Raising capital, like if you go down to San Francisco, you go to any coffee shop, they're talking about their pitch deck, who is in the investment committee meeting for Sequoia and Andreessen, and there's the new buzzwords that came out that are like AI enabled or whatever. They're just living it all day. So I kind of say like, hey, if you want to be a country music singer, you go to Nashville. If you want to be an actor, you go to LA. If you want to be in tech or venture, like San Francisco is the holy grail. Like even Seattle is kind of like a 3rd tier. Even they got Amazon and Microsoft, they just don't have anywhere near the venture capital that the Bay Area does. So it's good to be able to go down there, but I don't want to live there. And I don't really want, like, I like coming back and, being with my like Spokane people. We're just a little bit more like down to earth. People don't give a shit if you have a $10 billion company or you work at Subway. Like you're kind of, all things are equal here. I think I think raising capital much better than doing it here. Like, even though there's some like venture here, it's still like, if you lose $1 for me, I kind of want you dead in the street.
Yeah, coming for your kids.
Those folks are more like, well, I'm not going to put that much money in any one company. I'm going to invest in 100 and hope that 10 do really well. But I think to operate here, nobody can operate as affordable as you do in Spokane, because the bar is so much cheaper here that when you go to another city, you try to operate as lean as possible, because it'd be obscene to go pay on a price per square foot for that kind of office, or to hire somebody at that price point, and then you find out like they just live in a different market, so they get more money. Like, it doesn't mean they're better than you. They just get more cracks at the bat.
Yeah. Have you seen Spokane
more times? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot more people that have been at 5 or 10 startup companies in San Francisco than there have been here. If you've been here, you might have been at 3, because I ran half of them. And
he hasn't said he either worked for Jordan or he didn't. So have you seen the culture in Spokane? I mean, I'm outside looking in. A lot of my businesses aren't designed to go take over the world or address a national issue. Have you seen the ecosystem in Spokane kind of grow because you've stuck around and kind of built them here? No. Or is it still kind of, I mean, obviously, people doing work, but
yeah, the difference here is like, like I said, you can't go to a coffee shop and talk about we're all going, like, even in your business or our business, we're all going through the same stuff. Customers, there's budgets and capital, there's, employees, there's everything that kind of goes on with making business really, really hard. But there are some cheat codes, and, so are you going to take a call from, or if you can meet up with somebody in San Francisco and have them come to your office, and they come in 15 times and you get to see their progress, and then you're well funded as a VC fund, and there's a lot more competition, you can raise more money and do more things.
Yeah.
Here, I think what's been the struggle is like everybody's so undercapitalized. Like, hey, I just raised 50 grand from some startup fund. Like, cool. What can you really do with that? So I think the expectations here are that you're going to work for like $5,000 a year for the next 10 years and try to get this thing off the ground. Like we don't have like the incubator systems like a Y Combinator. If you look at Y Combinator and see the companies that go through there and have come out, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Tell me about that, because I've never heard that term. What is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of like going to Harvard or Stanford, but when you're a startup, if your idea and concept gets accepted, they shower you with go-to-market strategies. So it's kind of like I guess call it a startup boot camp, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And what's it called?
It's like American Idol for singers.
It's like
you get the exposure.
Idol.
They connect you to everything. Like if you make it through that, you come out the other side.
What's it called?
Y Combinator.
Y Combinator.
So then they have a thing called Pitch Day, which is like the competition. Those companies almost are, I don't want to say guaranteed, but you're raising $4 million at a $20 million valuation, and you may not even have a customer yet.
Yeah.
DoorDash, Airbnb, the list just it's a really, really long list of companies.
Well, that startup world really is a different world, because like you hit the nail on the head earlier, where like they want you to succeed or fail fast too.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's weird to be like, here's $4 million. By the way, fail really quickly, because if this isn't going to work, we want to go on to the next thing. And most people will be like, I need to do everything I can to protect this $4 million and make it work. And they're like,
you look at the smashing success of like Uber, but before Uber, there was a company called Sidecar. Nobody heard about them. It was an app where you get picked up by somebody else in a car, but they just never raised enough money. And, it had to fail a few times, and then Uber comes along and makes it rain. Airbnb, remember couchsurfing.com?
Yeah.
Remember Craigslist, like housing, underneath housing was like sublets and vacation rentals. Yeah. All they did was just take that and make it a booking platform. So I don't know that any of these are like that new of ideas. They just
but you're just making it more efficient.
Right amount of capital and maybe.
Well, and it's who can solve that problem, right? Yeah. Like, that you get paid in proportion to the problems you solve. Like, right. If you, the concept of Sidecar and Uber might be the same. Uber just solved the problem. Yeah. Like, however logistically they did it, they just actually did it. If in your space, Jordan, you actually end up solving this return distribution problem, like it's not a problem that people don't know exists, and it's not a problem that it hasn't existed. It's a problem that you're trying to tackle.
When you look at the inertia behind large organizations like the taxi industry, or in our case, the hospitality space, or the hotel lobbies, like any innovation is unbelievably hard to do. And so you kind of had to cheat. So like Airbnb, like, hey, we're not legal in New York. Like, we're still going to list the apartments. Hey, Uber, if you've seen the movie, like,
Kalanick,
they were like tracking all the politicians and shutting their Uber accounts down so that they could, couldn't get caught. So I do think there's a gray area, but without it, we wouldn't have Uber. We wouldn't have Airbnb. We wouldn't have a lot of the businesses that kind of disrupt the, make life better for us. So for every one of those companies, there's 100 that are dead that would have made the world better, but they got shut down.
Yeah, you would have been super proud of me. I did my first pitch in San Francisco, kind of the taking a boring industry and just putting fuel on it. So around property management space, but went up to the co-working space, took a Waymo, first autonomous car driving. It was way better. It like welcomed you. It was so great. And you go through that. And I'm like, how would you not be inspired in that? Yeah. And I think sometimes, to your point about the Spokane, that's where I struggle sometimes, is like the beauty of it is nobody cares, right? But sometimes the downside of it is nobody cares.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, there's not this like momentum culture behind it.
Yeah.
You can I always say you can just pick your own pace.
Yeah.
If you want to sprint, Spokane's great.
Yeah.
But nobody's pushing you.
Yeah. You're not rewarded for being a dreamer as much here as you are down there. Like, that's what they want. They want things to move the world forward. Also, like, there's so much money down there that they get to sit around and think about that stuff. Like, hey, in Spokane, there's not enough money to sit around and think about, like, oh, what would it be like if, flying cars could pick me up and drop me off at my job at Kaiser Aluminum. Like, it's just not the same.
Yeah, literally took an Uber from the airport, and we passed one of the Waymos, the Jaguar, and I go, man, how many of those are there? He says 10,000. And you hear like the deflation in his voice. Because he's like, pretty much my job's going to be done.
Yeah.
Like, my job will be gone. This thing does it better, faster, and doesn't get sick.
Yeah.
So super interesting.
It's like, hey, 150 years ago, 99% of the population was farmers, and now it's 1%, and other jobs got created, and our unemployment rates are so low. So these things have a way of working themselves out.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but I heard somebody say recently that AI is not going to put people out of business, but the people who don't know how to use AI will put people out of business. Yeah. Or, like, and it was the analogy of like, it might, AI might take away this segment of the market, but it's going to also create different segments of the market that don't exist. And so it's really more of like a transition of where the jobs will be and how they'll look. Then it's really going to be like take away, not adding.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about AI right now is, venture is meant to go disrupt big business, stodgy industries that need a change. Hey, Casper comes out with a mattress and it's rolled up in a box, so you don't have to figure out how to haul rent a semi truck to get the mattress to your house. But with AI, it's really been more of like a top down investment. So how are the big players already using it? And good luck competing with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Twitter. Any of these they're all launching AI. Like, they're ahead of the game. They have the largest data sets. They have the most amount of money. So this is kind of one of those things where AI is not going to go disrupt the big players because they're the ones that are putting all the money into it. So I don't know if it's because they've sharpened up or it just is like that's where things were headed anyways. But like, there's so much money pouring into AI right now. If you're an AI garbage can, like, you can go raise money. But is there just like 2 or 3 winners that kind of take over and they're the same people that are already there?
Yeah. I mean, because you look at it. So I just read an article. Yeah. Goldman Sachs, they were saying that AI can now do an IPO in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
The documents for an IPO. And you're like, that is an entire team of lawyers working for $15
million before.
Exactly. And I think that's what you think of everybody because I was in law coming out and they're like, Rocket Lawyer is going to take us down.
Yeah.
Rocket Lawyer made it efficient for some, but there's still going to be always elements, to Keith's point, that require something, or you're going to adapt the business. Yeah. And I think that's what will make it interesting. But that's why your perspective on it's always so interesting, because you have to look at, you're forecasting 10 years in the future at a high level, which have a lot of assumptions. And so as you're looking at that,
and whatever they are, they're all wrong too. You know that.
Yeah, well, you're like a weather forecaster sometimes.
This story is like as old as time, or as old as capitalism. And I mean, it's just market disruption. It's been happening for years. I mean, the horse and buggy got taken out by the automobile. I mean, like, it's not, it's just interesting. When you're living it, it might feel different. Mm-hmm. And I think AI feels different to people because it's a big shift or big change all at once. But like, this is get in where you fit in, and then part of your entrepreneurial endeavors from this point going forward is like, take that into consideration. Like, am I going into an endeavor that can be replaced by AI or not? Right.
I saw a podcast, a few weeks ago, and they're like, the greatest thing that ever happened to America, and the reason why we've been on top is because we had our most, ingenuity was our middle class.
Yeah.
And other countries don't have that. They only have an upper class, and then like the poorest of the poor. And one of the sad things is like a lot of the technology is kind of starting to wipe that out, where it feels like in the US, like you're either, our middle class is gone. Like, everybody's like in a full attack almost on that. And what happens when we kind of fall into that same trap where
I got a question for you guys.
Replaces all this work that was being done, and you're either a tech billionaire or you're
what do you guys consider middle class?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean,
because I feel like I'm not in the upper up, so I would like to consider myself.
Well, depends on if you allow for an upper middle. Yeah. As long as you can allow for an upper middle, I would say you're above median. You're 150% of median, so that would put you up. You make 80 to 120 grand a year.
Yeah, I mean, the Spokane household income's like 65,000, and it's like that's like two parents working $15 an hour jobs, or one parent making 60, and it's like. Daycare is $1,500 a month. Like, I don't know how anybody survives really doing anything like that anymore. But I don't know. I feel like
so what you're saying is the average income won't sustain middle class living, right? Like,
it's too expensive, and you're getting taxed the most.
Yeah.
Like in that level, you have no real benefits there, and it's the thing that separates us from other countries.
Yeah,
it's probably the worst part about our system.
Yeah,
is that the money COVID for the health side, but from the monetary side, it held it.
Fewer people, where you can't just live a single income life anymore with normal jobs and, have a car, have a phone, have a house, like housing costs. Like, it's a dual income society. Like, you look at Seattle, you have to, what's the average home price? Like $1 million now. It's like, you got to have a
probably
just under attorney just to afford a home.
Yeah, and we lived in London for a while, and I interned for a partner at a law firm, and they were celebrating at the age of 52. They bought their first home in London. And I was like, so you can see the writing on the wall. It's moving to that, and most of those are owned by companies. The issue was that the white picket fence and all that whole narrative is based on a middle class.
Yeah.
And then the narrative is going to be you can get experiences. Why? Because you're working all the time. And I think finding interruption to those pieces, I think, is really good. But social media expands on that. It kind of hurts that even more, because instead of settling for an electrician making 180, like, I'm going to go be an influencer and do this.
Yeah.
And I just think the trades are my only hope, is that we double down on trades. They come back into the market, and that's your middle class where it was, what's always been until.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being in high school, like, you're going to be a plumber and like you're a loser. You're not going to college. And then somebody rolls out of Gonzaga making $15 an hour. And then you go out to Coeur d'Alene and all the cigarette boats out there, like Bob's electrical and somebody else's mechanical, and they're building huge homes. And not that money's everything, but like, wow, how did our schools here get it so damn wrong?
Yeah.
Horribly wrong.
Yeah. So kind of they're getting close to that.
Laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're getting close to that hour, but what is 3 pieces of advice you would have given your younger self kind of getting into the entrepreneurial space? Like, if you could go back and say, here's the 3 like principal foundations I want you to never forget.
Mine's probably different because, again, it's a little probably mission oriented, but like,
that's good.
Follow, like, you create a mission as a startup, and like, that's what gets you excited and waking up every day. And so if you kind of sell out and try to do something just to make more money, like, ultimately you're probably going to fail. And, I've had some huge successes and some huge failures, but the lowest moments of my life weren't in combat, weren't in, from a company going under. They were like, I lost my purpose. Like, I started out to build one thing, and then I ended up building something that was just going to work and make money better. And I felt like I sold my soul, and I was in a dark place. Number 2.
So heeding the warning of that, just going back, is like to be clear on your mission, or to like,
I think when you're particularly in a startup, like, I don't know if you work at a bank, you wake up every morning like, hell yeah, like, let's go, like, rally the team and get, update our deposit slips. But like, in the startup world, I do think like it's really hard, but like, when there's something that you believe in, go through that pain and effort, and I think you'll probably have a better chance of finding success than doing some pivot to make more money. But
you got to be passionate about it.
You're not solving the pain like you originally wanted to solve.
Yeah.
For myself, that's for me personally. That may not apply to like anybody else. I don't know. 3 pieces, and then when Gonzaga went to the Final Four, I was like, I had too much shit to do, and I was like, oh God, I got these meetings, I got all these other things, and I called this guy who was super successful, and he goes, Michigan State hasn't been in the Final Four in 30 years. I had an opportunity to go, and I didn't. Spend the $800 on a ticket, get the flight down there, go with your brother. Don't be a dumbass. Like, you may be waiting 30 more years again to do it. So I did it. And it was like, it's so easy, I think, in a startup or as a founder, to like kind of shut down your social life or shut down your family or, doing other things. Like, I'm coaching my daughter's 3rd grade, basketball team right now. And like, it's been kind of a nice relief. Like, I've got so much stuff to do. Like, it's almost seems crazy that I added that into it, but it's a lot of good quality time with the family to try to, break it up. And then other piece of advice. I don't know. I'd say like take advice from people that you want to surround yourself with and that you aspire to be like and that you have a lot of respect for, than taking advice from people that don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know if like you don't have a lot of, if you have a lot of respect for somebody and where they're at and what they've achieved and how they did it. I think it's really important to build that kind of social network, especially professionally, around those kind of folks.
Yeah, so I love that. I think everybody who's come on the show so far has said different things, but a lot of them tend to come back to similar things. But I love that you're like, hey, find something you're passionate about, have a fire in your belly about, and get up excited for every day, and then take time to smell the roses, like coach your kids' soccer teams, like
life's short,
watch
man.
the Zags, like life's short. And so some of those themes seem to be blending into this Chestnut Checkers podcast of guests, and I think that's cool because the premise of this show and the concept is like meeting people that are playing this game at a high level, and then to hear them say things like, dude, stop, smell the roses, play with your kids, and make sure you're effing excited, and make sure that you find good mentors or people in your life that, that you respect, that you can go ask advice to. And it's just really cool to hear you say that.
There's a saying, there's no compression algorithm for experience. And I meet 25, 30-year-olds that have more experience than 60-year-olds because they just didn't really do any. They did one thing their whole life and they don't really know. And you got somebody who's like, by the time they're 30, they're on their third startup. They got a lot of experience. And so I think that, putting yourself out there and, with the startup scene, like I'm not going to be on my deathbed worrying that I didn't take a shot or, give myself a chance on something. Like, I feel pretty good that I gave it my all.
Awesome.
Success or failure.
No, I think that's an awesome way to wrap it up, man. Jordan, thank you so much for your time, dude. And hopefully we can have you back on the show as you gain some more legs, and love to hear more about what you're doing. And I'm going to go check your website out right now.
Yeah.
I want to hustle stuff.
Yeah. He'll be down at your office in a second.
It's a treasure hunt for sure. You'll see a lot of stuff, but no, appreciate it. And hey, I'd like to still take you up on those beers. So I see there's 2 there at the bottom.
Well, they were sitting for you.
Hey, that's a good time to mention our sponsor.
Yeah.
I need 4 of them. We got 4 people here in the office. So
I'll bring you more than 4. I'll bring you more than 4. So perfect. That's an easy one. That awesome. I can control. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bud.
Take care. All right, you guys. Thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.